So, Brother Justin, how you doing today, man?
And I'm doing pretty good, brother. I can't complain. How about yourself, Greg?
Yeah, all is well, all is well. Well, man, I appreciate you joining me to have this conversation. I know you got a lot going on. I know you got a new addition to the family. How's the baby?
The baby's doing really good. He is. He's doing good. He's healthy. He's happy. He's beautiful.
Man, that's a blessing. That's a blessing. Well, brother, I appreciate your time in talking with me. You're obviously very familiar with Don't Die Young. For anybody checking this out that don't know, I first met Justin a few months back, and he was kind enough to share his testimony of being a soul survivor. We did a series on don'tdieyoungcares.com with some Black men who shared their testimony of being soul survivors, of going through some struggles in the past, whether it was substance abuse or whether it was trying to get their life back on track from having a criminal background, trying to keep themselves encouraged, trying to keep their souls encouraged, and move forward in life. So Justin was one of the brothers that I had a chance to talk with, and I appreciated him sharing his story. But Justin, the thing that really resonated with me when we did Soul Survivor testimonies was your art, right? And having a chance to get to know you more, man, and hearing your story of how art was a coping mechanism for you in terms of your mental health. And man, that's something that I think the world needs to really pay more attention to, specifically as it relates to boys and young men of color, Black men, and what we go through and what so many go through. Unfortunately, a lot of what we hear, what's going on with Black men, is a lot of negative things, particularly relates to youth violence. You know, we're in the Baltimore area, so 300 murders a year seems to be the norm, and nobody is blinking an eye at that. But man, we know that that is devastating, and that is lives that are lost every year. Not only lives that are lost, but man, dreams that are lost, purposes that God set within each of those young men that are lost each year, families that are devastated, communities that are devastated, and quite honestly, man, the world is devastated and not being able to fulfill, whatever it was that God had in those young men. So talking about mental health and the trauma that young Black men go through is something that I think is important, because we overlook that, right? I've been reading a lot of articles as of late about mental health and how it really presents in young Black men. So when you go through trauma, our young brothers, they aren't going and sitting down and talking with counselors about living in poverty. They're not sitting and talking about poor education. They're not sitting and talking about the historical perspective of being Black in America. They're not sitting down and talking about their interaction with law enforcement and those negative interactions. They're not sitting and talking about how they feel society values them or devalues them. They're not sitting down talking about all of those things, because that's just not what we do. Right or wrong, that's just not what we do as men. So what typically happens is that anger, that frustration, it plays itself, unfortunately, out on the streets. So that's why I'm so intrigued. I was and still am very intrigued by your story, your testimony, because you found art as a way of dealing with some of that. So Brother Justin, I appreciate your time, man. So I would say let's jump right on in this thing, man. So let's start with your art, right? So we'll talk a little bit about your art and when you started and have that background, then we'll sort of work our way up to today and everything in between. So tell me a little bit about your art, when you started, what it meant to you when you were younger. Did anybody recognize anything special in you when you were younger, when you were doing your art?
Craig, it's funny you say that. I actually started drawing when I was six. No, younger than six. I was probably about four. And the first drawing I ever did was just a squiggly line I did. I'll never forget doing it in my parents' bedroom. And it was something about just touching, the crayon and the paper. It just connected. And then throughout my life, I started drawing. I picked up the habit. I really enjoyed it. I couldn't always understand why. I just loved it. Like it was a place I could go where I would be free in my head just to be able to do whatever I want and express myself. So it started at a young age, and I started drawing throughout school. In elementary school, I was in. I loved art, and then I got to middle school. I went to Deer Park, and I got into the visual arts program. And that's where I got a real taste for like different mediums of art, like sculpture and different, pastels, oil paint, different types of things. And when I was in 8th grade, I was in an art class, and I had we had something called an expressly self-portrait, where you would use different color techniques, warm colors, cool colors. I chose cool because I think I'm a cool person and laid back. And I used the cool colors to express myself in the portrait. And my work was selected to go into a kids magazine for art. And from then on, it was just like that little moment of appreciation and recognition for like something that I just did through expression. It just felt good and it resonated with me. So then throughout high school, I drew a little bit as a hobby. I got concerned with being cool and other things, so I didn't really, stick with it. And then as you were talking about some things earlier, art, I kind of took a break from art and started, I was living life, was partying, doing different things, drugs, alcohol, that stuff. And then I ended up meeting a girl and having, starting a family at a young age. So art kind of fell off. I was so concerned with life and doing, taking care of my responsibilities.
So just about how old were you when your art fell off for you? Do you remember how old you were when you sort of separated from your art?
Yeah, it was probably about when I was about 19. About 19, because up until I was 18, I would still sometimes come home from college and I would, doodle here and there or sometimes draw just because. But it really wasn't until, probably about 19 that it just kind of fizzled out. And it fizzled out for a while. And it didn't come back until actually around the birth of my my first child, my daughter. And looking back, it was because like during that time period, in a short amount of time, I went through a lot. Like my life took a traumatic turn for like stress and drugs and a number of other things, family, and just so and it was like it was a rough time, very, very rough time. But I think in that rough time is where the need for like expression or getting it out brought about the art back to me. I never forget, I was actually sitting in my kitchen when I was just like, I need to draw. I need to do something. I need to do something to get this out, get this energy, get these emotions out. I have to do something.
Hey, Justin, so and I want to touch on that a little more. Like when you got to that point when you were in your kitchen and you felt like you need to draw, you need that outlet. But before we get there, would you mind going back a little bit and talking to us a little bit about the rough time what you went through that sort of was a prelude for you to rediscover art? You talk to us a little bit about that time in your life?
Yeah, it was a really dark time. I had moved out of my parents' house, dropped out of school. I had a felony record I was participating in a Grand Theft Auto ring with cars in a dealership. And it, looking back, it was like, what were you doing? But back then it was, it was quick money for me. It was good money too, and it was fun. But because of that, I ended up, I got arrested. Like I said, I had a multiple felony record. I had a warrant out for my arrest when I moved out that I found out through my uncle when they came to look for me. So if you want to break it down, I was 20 years old, went from college, working a decent job, no kids, partying, hanging with drug dealers and good friends, good people. I thought it was a good life to just jumping out of my parents' crib, no money saved. Like I said, criminal record, warrant from IRS. And I ended up living with my now ex-wife, the mother of my children, my 4 children I have now. And it was just a really rough time. And then on the pressure with the warrant, not having a job, living with my family, or she was pregnant with my daughter at the time. I couldn't find a useful outlet, so I did like a lot of people do. I turned to drugs, and selling them, using them, and for a little while it worked because it was quick, good money for us. I was able to hold my own in the house. I was able to do a little bit of things, but I didn't realize, what I was doing to myself or my family at the time. And it was a really dark time. And because of the drugs, a lot of people talk about just drug use in general. It has a spiraling effect, and it affected my partner at the time, our relationship, my time with my kids, because I would always took care of my kids, but I was under the influence, so I didn't want to put myself around them or where they could see me like that. So it had a little bit of an effect on, not a little bit, that's an understatement, it had a tremendous effect on my family and myself and friends, and it was a rough time for me. And then the drugs, of course, affected my behavior, my attitude, my demeanor, what I thought was important outside of my household. So that, like I said, combined with the record, not getting a job, and just other stress, my relationship, she and I not getting along, certain things we were going through, being a young couple with a new baby on the way. She already had, a child.
Right.
It was a lot. And like I said, at that point in time, I turned to drugs as a way to cope.
Yeah, it just seemed like one thing led to another, and it just seemed like sort of became a mountain of stress and things that you were going through, and that's why, man, I appreciate your testimony so much and your willingness to share about your life, because we know a lot of young brothers, man, very similar stories, right? For one reason or another, maybe get involved in drugs or some sort of criminal activity, and or using drugs, that sort of thing, and it just starts to sort of spiral. So having Black men like you being able to share your story, man, I think is really, really important. So now what I want to do, Justin, is so we kind of see, what was going on in your life at the time. So we know that you started at a very young age as far as your interest in art. Then your late teens, around 18, 19, you sort of disconnected from art and just started, living your life a little bit, let's say, and things started to spiral for you. But that day in your kitchen, when you were, I think you say you were around 20, after going through that, drugs and crime and those sort of things, what was it that day in your kitchen that told you that you need to get back to your art to kind of deal with that? Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like, what was going on? Like, where did that come from? And what was it that made you feel like that could be a difference for you? Your art could be a difference maker for you?